Russia is in hysteria. A hellish raid on the occupiers. Crimea is gripped by panic and hellish explosions. Meanwhile, Akhmat is in the grave. The elite Russian troops turned out to be not heroes, but hospital patients. Their lungs simply burned out. Meanwhile, Putin suddenly spoke about a truce by May 9th. What is behind this? Bluff or calm before a new hell? Watch.
The real buchanocide of the Russian army by Ukrainian defenders in a very significant and impactful manner indeed.
More precisely, there's no life left here now.
On the front of the Russian-Ukrainian war, there are no negotiations. The enemy is advancing, we are defending. According to the Deep State portal, the Russian army advanced in Uspenovka near Kotliarovka and Razdolnoye in the Donetsk region.
In the last 24 hours, the greatest activity of the occupying forces was recorded in the Pokrovsk direction. More than 60 attacks by Russian occupiers aiming to regain previously lost positions. It should be noted that in certain sections of this front, the Russian occupiers have tactical successes.
While the Russians in Ukraine are killing adults and children, Ukrainians continue to strike strategically important objects for conducting military operations in the Russian Federation. The Ministry of Defense of the occupying country reported 91 drones shot down last night over the Russian Federation and temporarily occupied Crimea. Despite the fact that Putin's army is pushing forward relentlessly, the Kremlin dictator himself and his servants are talking about a ceasefire.
The mass use of strike drones by the Ukrainian defense forces, according to the Russian Federation itself, leads to losses in personnel and equipment of about 70%. Therefore, they fully understand that under the continuous strikes by the Ukrainian defense forces using FPV drones, including on the operational rear of Russian troops in these directions, it is practically impossible to rotate personnel. This is precisely why the so-called ceasefire was used. By the way, it is not ruled out that the so-called May ceasefire will be used by the Russian occupation forces, specifically for the redeployment of operational reserves, with the aim of further advancing in the Sloviansk-Kramatorsk direction.
Alongside the ceasefire, the statement by the Russian General Staff about the complete liberation of the Kursk region is equally false.
This information does not correspond to reality. Even Russian public channels and the so-called Z military correspondents are forced to acknowledge the fact that these statements by official representatives of the Russian General Staff are made solely for political reasons. In other words, it is about the Russian dictator wanting to sell another so-called victory by the 9th of May.
The fact that Putin does not spare his soldiers is no news to anyone, and even more so for the soldiers of the Akhmat Battalion. Therefore, the vaunted and invincible Kadyrovites are now licking their wounds in the hospital. This was reported by their commander, Opti Alaudinov. It became known that most of the Akhmat Special Forces fighters from the Aida group who crawled through a gas pipe in the city of Sudzha in the Kursk region now have lung problems.
Apparently, it is about legitimizing the withdrawal of Akhmat units to operational reserves in Russian hit groupings. In other words, under the guise of mass poisoning of the Akhmat special unit fighters, a legal basis is effectively being created for their evacuation directly from the combat zone to the rear areas of the Kursk region.
And as stated by the President of Ukraine, Volodymyr Zelensky, justice inevitably comes, let's add, wherever the Russians may hide. Justice has caught up with individuals from the higher command of the Russian army, reports the Foreign Intelligence Service. They do not specify who exactly was eliminated. However, at least one high-profile murder in Russia has been reported recently by both propagandists and the media.
Every voice matters. Join our community, support independent journalism and help us bring you the truth from Ukraine. Become a member of Ukraine today. Join us now. Front is on fire. The occupiers are coming from all sides and are burning alive. Powerful explosions, ammunition detonations. The occupier is blown to pieces, all thanks to the precise work of FPV drones. Tanks, armored personnel carriers, vans, and even cars filled with soldiers are turned to ashes. Strikes one after another. The equipment burns alive and the forces scatter, but it's useless. The Ukrainian armed forces are burning the enemy to the ground. Meanwhile, the Kremlin is preparing a new hell. We have gathered all the latest footage from the front lines for you. What's happening at the front? Watch.
The Russians are pressing on the front, but Ukrainian fighters are holding back the enemy even in the Kursk region. Meanwhile, Russia is preparing motorized breakthroughs for the summer and fall to bypass Ukrainian drones, analysts from the Institute for the Study of War write. In other words, the Kremlin has no plans for a long truce. The occupiers are massively training small groups to move on mopeds and motorcycles. This allows them to quickly pass through the so-called kill zones of Ukrainian drones. However, the Russians themselves are also trying to create such kill zones. At the moment, one of the most difficult directions remains the defense of Toretsk. This is the longest battle of the entire war with Russia, over 10 months longer than Bakhmut. The 100th Brigade and other units are currently holding about a fifth of the city. There is no actual front line there. Ukrainian positions can be deep in the enemy's rear, and vice versa. In Toretsk itself, the enemy has lost more than 15,000 soldiers. Thousands of bodies lie among the ruins of the city because no one retrieves them. The Russians do not spare their own. If they notice that the Ukrainian armed forces are taking prisoners, they try to eliminate them. Ukrainian artillery and drones cut off all supply routes for the occupiers, but the Russians are doing the same. Most of the losses occur during entry into and exit from Toretsk. The orcs are pushing towards the Dnipro. The enemy is trying to reach the administrative border of the Dnipropetrovsk region. That's why there is a real hell on the Pokrovsky direction right now. The lack of operational and tactical prospects does not stop the enemy. They persistently try to break through our troops' defenses and reach the borders of Dnipropetrovsk. To this end, the Russian command daily sends new units into battle, drives their soldiers to death, and reports on illusory successes and victories. This is reported by the Commander-in-Chief of the Armed Forces of Ukraine, Oleksandr Syrsky. Also on April 9th, Syrsky noted that one of the objectives of the military exercises West 2025 in Belarus, which will involve the Russian army, could be the covert formation of strike groups capable of attacking Kiev again, following the scenario of the year 22. In 6 months, the anti-aircraft gunners of the 3rd Assault Brigade shot down 220 and hit another 28 UAVs. The brigade once again took first place in the ranking of electronic points for the number of drones destroyed among all line brigades. The fighters also set records for destroying small-sized targets and became leaders in neutralizing Lancet loitering munitions. They have accounted for 40 reconnaissance Azala, 29 Supercam and Skat, a 12 Erlan, 1 rare Merlin, 17 Lancet loitering munitions including the modern modification Product 55, 2 Molnia, and up to 150 small-sized UAVs, the interception of which requires the highest level of skill. The total number of targets hit is 349. They were intercepted by our UAVs, shot down by air defense systems, and small arms. All of this is the work of the anti-aircraft missile and artillery battalion of the 3rd Assault Brigade. Each fatality for Russian drone operators in this video. HIMARS pure detonation. The UAV brigade fighters of Magura detected an enemy gun and instantly orchestrated a true symphony of destruction. What does real combat harmony look like? Like this. The pilots of the unmanned aerial reconnaissance of the 47th Separate Mechanized Brigade launched the Furia into the sky, which clearly captured the enemy's D-30 howitzer camouflaged in the forest strip. The camouflage didn't help. The coordinates were promptly relayed to the artillerymen. Then everything goes according to plan. Quick calculations, targeting, and a powerful strike by HIMARS. The hit is precise, the detonation complete. The gun disappears along with the crew. This episode is yet another proof of the effective interaction between reconnaissance and artillery. Each unit complements the other, working clearly and cohesively. It is precisely this synergy that allows for quickly locating the target, transmitting coordinates, and destroying the enemy before they have a chance to open fire. Bulk deliveries of Russian forces to Kobzon's concert, performed by UAV operators of the Assault Regiment Luhansk of the National Police Brigade LUT. While the enemy unsuccessfully tries to advance and assault Ukrainian positions, our drones methodically carry out their mission of goodwill, sending another batch of occupiers to an unforgettable performance by Maestro Kobzon. The operators of the strike UAVs of the Luhansk regiment work professionally, calmly, and with precision akin to that of a jeweler. One precise strike and the equipment is hit, personnel neutralized, and fortifications destroyed. Their target is not just equipment, but any enemy gathering that dares to approach our positions. The drones of the Luhansk regiment are not just eyes in the sky, they are retribution from above. FPV strikes, pinpoint drops, bombs on positions, and another dozen Putin's men are sent to a concert with no return ticket. While the Russian command continues to throw more and more reserves into battle, Ukrainian forces economically, precisely, and inspiredly reduce the lists of enemy formations. The work continues. The tickets are already printed. This entire vibrant weekly chronicle is as bright as the flames of enemy ammunition depots after the Shatter drone strikes. In recent days, the strike UAV operators of the Charter unit have been destroying everything the enemy tried to hide. The ammunition depots ignited like festive fireworks, and the fiery flashes became a clear signal the Ukrainian sky is under control. Enemy mortar crews in artillery positions kick, and at least 3 pieces of equipment couldn't withstand it. Each sortie is a minus for the enemy and a plus for our victory. Khartia continues to operate precisely, quickly and mercilessly, and while the Russians try to hide in forests, groves or behind concrete shelters there, their personal gift is already flying from above. The news report from the front for today is as follows. The front is under control. The enemy assaults, but unsuccessfully. The highest activity was recorded in the Kursk direction, 25 attacks, 8 airstrikes and more than 250 shellings. Despite the scale, there is no advancement. The heaviest fighting remains in the Pokrovsk direction, where Ukrainian defenders stopped 75 enemy assault actions. As of April 30th, the enemy attempted to advance in the areas of Staronikolayevka and Tarasovka, aiming to cut off the logistics of the armed forces of Ukraine. But the armed forces of Ukraine continue to hold back the onslaught. In the Lyman direction there were 21 attacks, and in the Kramatorsk direction 13, but none were successful. In the Kharkiv region near Kupiansk, the enemy is amassing manpower and attempting to advance along the Oskol River. Since the end of last year, the enemy has been regularly attempting to cross the river, especially in the areas of Peshanoe and Kolesnikovka, where large-scale armored assaults are taking place. Currently, battles are ongoing to the northeast of Kupiansk. The Russians are trying not only to cross the water barrier, but also to expand the bridgehead on the right bank, especially in the areas of Dvorechnaya and Figolevka. Ukrainian defenders are recording regular assaults and concentrations of enemy infantry. At the same time, the enemy is actively conducting engineering work, building crossings, amassing equipment and preparing for new attacks. In the directions of Gulyapol, Orekov, Volyn and Polesiye, there is relative calm. Despite the pressure, the armed forces of Ukraine maintain the initiative, continuing to destroy enemy equipment and manpower, systematically reducing their offensive capabilities. And for other news from the front, tune in tomorrow.